What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and today we're going to be going over stage intros and entrances for stages. We have our character entrances, but we can also have these stage entrances to kind of familiarize the players with the stages and with the environments they're going to be fighting on. It's also a cool little thing. While things can be loading in the background, you can be playing this sequence to kind of take away from, just loading at a black screen or something. You can have a little bit of extra time to prepare the game and the match that's about to happen. Of course, these can be skipped, and with that, you can't rely on it solely for that, but you can prepare things in the background or wait for certain things to load in, such as when doing actor streaming. So it does have a practical use as well that can be applied. Here we're doing it mainly for the visuals. But we're basically going to have the stage prepare, and we're going to start the music when that's the case. And then once the entrance to the stage is finished, then we're going to go into the character entrances and let it play out from there. So it's going to be a pretty simple episode, but another fun one. I really like this one because you can customize it for every stage, so every stage can be different. So say we play this again, we can go and play on, say, this map, and then you'll see if there's another entrance, and you can do whatever you want with it. You could rotate it, you could zoom in and out, you could go into the stage like I did on the other one, or you could just do a quick like left to right like I did there. So you have a lot of options. Alright, so we're about to get started, but before we do, if you'd like to catch up, this is episode 115 of the Fighting Game Tutorial series. So we're pretty far along. We still have many episodes to go. But if you'd like to get caught up, I'll leave the playlist right here. You can check out every episode that we've done to date to get to this point, as well as any future episodes that are added to the playlist. I'll also leave this episode right here, where we did the stage selection screen, because I think that's a cool one, and it definitely ties into this topic. Alright, but otherwise, let's get started. So we actually don't need anything in the code today. Everything's going to be in the blueprints and within the editor itself. And we're going to learn about level sequences and master sequences. We have used actor sequences in the past, and I've mentioned that you can use level sequences for some of the things that we want to do, such as even the character entrances if we'd like. However, this is definitely a time where we want to use level sequences or some other camera effect, because we can customize it per stage. We can also, change depending on certain variables. Like, if you have different forms of stages, you could use different level sequences. Say you have two sections to a stage, or some stages have parts where you can, throw an enemy through this wall and you're at this new section. I know Tekken does this a lot, and Dead or Alive. These games, you can have multiple level sequences for the same stage. You could be fighting on different parts of the same stage, and all this kind of goes into, your own personal wants for the game. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my stages. We can start with our first one here, which is the side-scroller example map. This is the template map in Unreal for the side-scroller. And I have one on here, and I have one on the Trail of the Wise map that I showed you. But we can do it on any map. Just basically takes you following the same procedure. So there's two things you really want. You want a camera of some sort. I usually go to cinematic and drag in the Cine Camera Actor for cinematic camera actor. It's not required that you do this. You could have a blueprint that has a camera on it that you drag into the scene. You could have a regular camera that is brought into the scene. Either way, I prefer the Cine Camera here because it does have a lot of cool features for making more cinematic effects, such as cutscenes, and you can throw it on rails and different things like that. So, by all means, use whatever you feel comfortable with. I'm going to be using the Cine Camera Actor. I've brought it into the scene here. That's the default camera here. And then I've renamed it to Stage Intro Camera. The way you can rename these when it's an object in the scene, you right click and you're like, I don't see anything here about the name, you can actually just rename it right here in the details panel. Just change it to stage intro camera or something that you'll know what it is. And then we're going to need to have some level sequences, or basically things that we can use that can be played either by the level or in the level to then create an effect we want. In this case, play the little cinematic entrance for the stage. So to do that part, you can actually go to cinematics up here at the top and add a level sequence. If you want to do multiple parts to the sequence like I did, you noticed how each one of the intros had like 2 different parts. You could put that all in one level sequence if you're careful with it. You know, you could really map out everything. You want to zoom in here and rotate here. You could also have multiple sequences. I went the multiple sequences route mainly because I wanted to play around with this master sequence thing. It's super cool and it's very useful here, but it by no means is required. You could do it all in one level sequence if you want. So again, as always, do what you feel is right. What I did is I added a master sequence. When you click this, you'll get a bunch of stuff that pops up. And it's a little bit confusing at first, but really what's going on here is you have this name. This is the name of the file. This is where it's going to go. And then you have number of shots. All this stuff is default stuff. Like it's going to be 5 seconds long. There's going to be this many shots in it. We're going to create directories with a specific number of shots under all that. And this is a little bit, it was getting a little bit too confusing for me. I played around with it and I created it and I added a bunch of stuff to test it out. But really all this stuff is not necessary. The main important part is just the master sequence itself. Because if we look inside of a master sequence before we create that, I put mine in here. I made a new folder in my levels folder called stage intros and I put it in here. These are my individual level sequences, but this is my master sequence. And so if I click onto this master sequence, it'll open up Sequencer. So in the master sequence, I can actually have 2 level sequences or as many as I want really. And in this case, you can kind of see that you have the preview right here. You can see what these sequences are going to be doing. So this is the master sequence. I'm going to play the master sequence and then it's going to play these 2 individual level sequences. So that's super cool. Yes, again, you could do this in one level sequence, but it's kind of cool to be able to make different sequences. You can modify them separately, and then you can actually have these put into one parent sequence and then just play the parent sequence to show it all. So it's something I enjoyed a lot. And now that you see what this does, you see, we don't really need all that confusing stuff. We don't really need a template set up for us. We can kind of just do it as we go. So with that in mind, now I go back, I hit Add Master Sequence, and you can actually leave most of this as is. Create a new one. I'll even create it, I'll create it here so you can see. And we can go through it together. So now in my levels folder, I have this SSEM Master Sequence folder with the master sequence here, and then I have the shots folder. What I did, because I actually didn't need all that template set up, was I deleted the shots folder entirely. And then once that's deleted, I only have the master sequence in here, and it has some shots in it. I took out everything that was in it already, and I just added my own by hitting plus shot. We'll get to that in a second. But then I just renamed this folder to whatever I wanted. So I'm going to delete this new one that I made since I don't need it now. Alright, so now we'll do this together so you can see the whole process from start to finish. So here's my master sequence. You saw the extra folders I deleted because I didn't need. You saw that I cleaned out the things that were already in the master sequence here. And now what we can do is if we go to our other folder, I have 4 level sequences. I'm using 2 for each one, but again, it's up to you. You could use 1, you could use more for each stage. It could be different for each stage. So you determine that, but regardless, you're going to need at least 1 level sequence. So to do that, you can hit Add Level Sequence and direct it to where you want to go. So I have stage intros, and I just have them out here. I just called it whatever, like Side Scroller Example Map, Intro 1, Intro 2, or Trail of the Wise, Intro 1, Intro 2. Once you create it, You won't have to do anything else in terms of setting it up. We'll just actually have to set the details in here for what we want the animation to look like. So this is entirely up to you. But what I did is you'll have nothing in here to begin with. You'll just have, you might have, like a default root in here, but you won't have any specific actors to your camera that you brought in earlier, which remember I called mine the stage intro camera. For that guy, what I did actually, I clicked track, actor to sequencer, and then stage intro camera. It'll be here. I already have the track, so it doesn't allow me to add it twice, which is why you're not seeing it here now. Once you have this, you can open it up, and you have all the different parameters about it that you would like to change. So all I was changing for this first one is my location. So I opened up transform, location, and then I clicked this button here to add a new key at the current time. So I do that at the start. This is your timeline. And this is where I've decided I would end my level sequence. So 150 frames at 30 frames per second. Okay. And so now what we're doing is I've added another one at the end, or toward the end of my animation, by clicking this again. And this is a straight horizontal movement. You can actually see the camera up above here. If I click on it, I can move it. You can see what it looks like. So what I've done is I added my 2 keys, as I told you. And then you set your values at these keys. So it's at -909, or excuse me, let's look at this one. That's at -910 right now for the Y. Perfect. So let's say we want it to be -915 to start. And then let's click on this other keyframe, which we can see is 2556. So maybe I want this to be 2550. I set this here. The sequencer does the rest. It will automatically figure out at what frame, what time it should be at what position. And I'll go between these 2 points. So that's essentially me making my level sequence. You can make yours a lot more advanced, but that's one that I made. The other one I made, if you want to see them all, is this guy. It's another horizontal. I just did it lower. So I just did basically 2 pans of this stage. Okay? Now that I have 2 level sequences, what I can do is I can go into my master sequence. I remove them. That way you don't have to try and guess what's happening here. And then what we need to do is actually add shots. So if you click plus track, you can add a shot track. You'll probably already have one. It does depend on your version of Unreal and how you made the master sequence. So if you have the shots section here already, then perfect. If you don't, just simply add a shot track right here. Then all you have to do is click add shot, and then you can pick the ones that you want here. So I want my side scroller example, intro, 1 and 2. And I'm going to put them directly next to each other with no time in between. That way the camera does this, and then the camera does that. And you can see it up above doing both the things that we want it to do. Okay? You can save it. And now this sequence, this master sequence is good. The only thing you have to be careful of is I was playing around with the master sequence, making a few of them and moving their folder. And I actually created and left a few of them in the scene. So we only really want one. So what I'm going to do now is delete the ones that either aren't being used or were already removed, and make sure I only have one. If you don't have one in your world outliner, you can actually drag it in just like this. I don't want to do that because I do already have the one. But just in case something got a little bit screwed up, you can simply drag it back into the scene and it will be there. Okay, and then once you have this stuff in here, you actually have created your master sequence successfully. You do need to still utilize it, so we're going to do that now. We can go into our level blueprint and take a look at the logic we had in here. So we have this level loaded event, which is related to our level streaming stuff. So essentially, this is like a begin play for the level, but after it's been streamed in, that's how we were using it. So using it that way, we were removing the loading icon data, so the loading screen or if there was a loading image, make sure to get rid of them. Then what we were doing is we were stopping any music that was already playing and playing a new type of music, specifically the music for the stage. So with that, we still want to do this because we don't want it to be quiet while that sequence is playing for the stage. The music should be playing. But the other thing we were doing was we were calling this game mode's level streamed in event, which is essentially the begin play for the game mode. But again, we only want to do it once the data for the stage is streamed in, so we don't create things or try and access things early. However, we're not going to do this anymore right away. We're going to do it after the sequence because I don't want to set up the cameras and start the character entrances until the stage sequence is finished. So we have to add some other stuff before we do that, okay? So this is the same logic that we had before, but we're going to add a bunch of other stuff first. So you can have your remove loading icon and you're playing the correct music for the stage stuff still. You can leave all that. If you're following the series directly, you can have it just like that. This is the new stuff. Now what we have to do is we have to make sure that the characters, or the players really, are looking at the camera that we set up in the scene as soon as we stream in here. Remember, wherever I use the set view target with blend, I've also used it 2 or 3 other places. This will not exactly work for multiplayer. It will to an extent, but it won't do everything that we need. So we're going to have to add more when we get into network multiplayer. So just letting you know that I'm aware of it. But for now, this is perfectly fine. So what we want to do is we want to grab our camera that we're going to want to be looking through, which is this guy right here, our stage intro camera. You can literally click in the world outliner, hover over the level blueprint tab, and drag it in. Sometimes when you right click, you can also get this by creating a reference to stage intro camera, but for me this isn't always here. It's not always available to me. So that's why I want to show you the other method as well. But either way, you want to get a reference to the stage intro camera, and then you also want to get the player controller that needs to be seeing this. Again, right now, we're not doing networked multiplayer, so we only care about the first player, which is player index 0, and that will do the trick. Once you get this player controller, you can drag off of it and type set view target with blend. And then you need to pass in a new view target, okay? The player controller is the target, but you need a new view target for what is this player or this screen going to be seeing, basically. It needs to be seeing the camera, so that you pass in your camera reference here. You can have a blend time and stuff if you want. Not necessary since we're starting with it there, but remember, all this stuff depends on how you're making your game, so don't worry about those specific settings too much. You can play around with them to make them look better. Now, we also need to play the sequence. If you're using the standard cinematic camera like I am, then there's a very simple way to do this. We know for sure once we set the view target with blend that we want to play the sequence. Basically, as soon as the player can see this, then we know, yep, we're good to play it. We don't need to wait or delay for any reason. So now all we have to do is grab our sequence and bring it in. Okay? Same way that you could do with the camera. Again, sometimes you can actually get this just by clicking on the object in the world outliner. So like if I click on this here, and then I go into my level blueprint, I can sometimes create a reference to it. But again, I've had issues with that in the past where it wasn't popping up. So whatever method works for you. Off of your sequence, your master sequence, which I just realized is called, this is the stage name, Master Sequence Master. I'm going to change the name of that. Doesn't have to be so complicated. And now we have our sequence, and we need to drag off of it and grab the actual player so we can play it, literally. So sequence player, and you can scroll down to the bottom and get it. Get the sequence player. You'll get this node right here. Off this sequence player, you can type play to play the sequence. Literally that simple. Once you call this, it will play the master sequence that we passed in here, and this will begin. What we want to do now, there's actually a way to figure out when this sequence is finished. And when the sequence is finished, we should make sure that we take advantage of that to then trigger any additional logic that we want. So we want to make sure that once the sequence is finished, we go and start doing the game mode logic, which is when we play the character entrances. So drag off the sequence player, type bind event on finished. This one right here. And you'll get this node. Make sure you do pass the execution line, the white line, into it to make sure that it binds successfully, and pass in the sequence player to the target. You have this red event thing here. This is a delegate, which basically means what are we going to use once this bound event occurs. So once this sequence player is finished with the master sequencer, in other words, it has played once entirely. It's not set to loop, and it has played to completion. Once that occurs, it's going to fire this event. So you can drag off of this and type add custom event. Or when you bound, it might have created one for you. You can simply right click and rename, or you can change the name here. However you want to do it. Make sure you have an event that is plugged into this event on this bind. Then this is when we want to do our game mode level streamed in logic, which again, I'm just calling basically, this is essentially my begin play for my game mode. It's just that we don't want to do it on begin play. We want to do it when the level is finished streaming in. Once you do this, you should be good to go. If you go into your stage now, you have to make sure you go back to your persistent level so that we can trigger all of our events properly. Also, in this master sequence, make sure it's only as long as you need it. Make sure you trim it down, otherwise you'll have this excess at the end that is just playing and it's not really doing anything. Now we'll try playing again, and there shouldn't be any excess. It should finish the level sequence and then just initially go into the character sequences right after. And there we go. So that's one of our stage intros done. If you want to do it to another stage and add them to all your stages, it's very simple. Go to your other stages that you want. And you don't even have to go through the whole process again. You can actually go into where your sequences are, copy them. I literally duplicated them both. If you right click and hit duplicate or hit Control W, you'll duplicate them, rename them. You can click into them. You can see for this one I went out and across. So when I'm looking here, you can see the Y and the Z values will change. It's going over and down. If I click on this, you can see it. And then I actually have the other sequence that I have actually goes deep into the stage, so it changes the X value location as well as the yaw rotation. You will have to make another master sequence. I deleted mine, so we can just do it again. Really what I would do is duplicate it, call it I could type, there we go. And then you'll want to make sure this is in the scene. Like I said before, I had one and it got removed, and so it's a little bit weird, but just make sure you have one in the scene. Make sure that your actual sequence here is selected, just in case you're messing around with and there's any weird behavior. It's not unsolvable, very simple. Just make sure when you click onto them that you have the level sequence somewhere in the world outliner and it's got the level sequence assigned. Alright, then this is our master sequence. It's going to have the old shots set in here. We don't want that. We want our new ones. See, these ones are actually a different length, so I want to also trim the master sequence so it fits that length. Then also make sure you go into your level blueprint and do the same stuff. So you see I have my remove loading icon, I have my music that's being set, and then I go and I make sure I grab my new stage intro camera. Make sure you drag your stage intro camera into the scene. You're still going to need one of these guys. I have one, and of course I've called it the same thing as I did in the other stage. That way I know what it's going to be called when I look for it in the world outliner. I do the same logic here. I grab the correct level sequence for this one. Sequence player goes to play. I bind the event. And then I call my level streamed in. So you can copy this logic from your first level and from all your levels to make it a little bit nicer and easier on you. Just make sure you change the sequence and the camera to be the ones on the correct level. They come directly from the persistent level because that's where they're being added right now. Okay, like I just have this stage intro camera in here because we're in the Trail of the Wise. However, we could be in the persistent level and have access to a lot more stuff. So if I enabled everything, like if I enabled Trail of the Wise in the persistent level, you can see I have the stage intro camera. If I enable side scroller example map, you can see that I have 2 stage intro cameras. So depending on how you want to handle it, you could have one and just stream it in when you want to use it for that level, like when that level streams in, or you could have one on each level here. It's not really going to matter in my opinion because if you stream in with your one level, you probably won't be streaming in your other one. So at one point or another, there's only ever going to be one streamed in at a time. So I don't see any issues with it. And play this again. I can now play my Trail of the Wise stage. And you see that it's playing the correct sequences. So it's that simple to change it, to make new ones for all your stages. Make it a little bit friendlier for the player when they're seeing stages for the first time, or when they just want to, you know, chill for a minute before they get into the fight. It also buys them some time. You know, maybe they're not quite ready to do the fight yet. If they are, they'll probably skip it after they've seen it. And we'll get into skipping both the stage and character entrances in the next episode. So anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope this helped. If it did, please subscribe. It does more for myself and the channel than anything else you can do. It's completely free, and I really appreciate it. I'm going to give a huge shout out to my YouTube membership and Patreon supporters who help me so much every single month. Thank you so much for the love and support, and for continuing to get me excited to work on these episodes. If you had any issues with this tutorial, or any of my tutorials, feel free to join the Discord community. There's a link in the description. It's completely free, and I'll be happy to help you out with any issues you had, get you situated. And anyway, guys, that's all I got. So, like I said, I'm Shawnthebro. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one, guys. Goodbye.